there must be parts of that, you know, I don't know if he'll get away with, but I think all morally that we could all stand behind, such as, you know, the federal mandate on companies with more than 100 employees that they have to do this. If it's possible for him to nullify that and say, you know, to countermand that order or somehow declare that he's going to protect Texas businesses that refuse to go along with that, or whatever exactly how that works, I think that sounds all great and fine. If he's saying no Texas company can require that their employees are vaccinated, well, that's just completely crazy. And it's the same thing as saying that they have to require a mandate. You know, you have companies where, well, they're in the healthcare business, right? Or they take care of people who all are like at-risk people, right? People who are already sick and poor and overweight and have diabetes and gotta really, you know, they got to make sure that their employees aren't spreading or do everything that they can to make sure their employees are not spreading disease to people that they're taking care of, whatever it is. And you can make up your own circumstances for it. People dealing with children or whatever. Say you own a daycare and you want to be able to tell your customers, the children's parents, that all your staff are vaccinated. And that kind of thing to me that's just between the employer and the employee. I don't see how the federal or the state government or any government has the right to get in between that at all. But it's, you know, it's the very same principle at stake, right? Is that, you know, who gets to tell who what to do? And the answer is the people who are signing the contract as per their agreement. And that's it. That's the end of the argument, right? Unless it's, you know, hiring a hitman or something, that's different. But to, you know, to hurt somebody else, to violate somebody else's rights. But otherwise, I don't see where Abbott has, you know, a position there. And I saw where Dave Smith said, listen, if you think that passing a law banning vaccine passports, which I think that's different, right? Employees, this is the same thing as like customers to be able to go in to open businesses and stuff. But anyway, Dave's saying, look, if you think that that banning this kind of thing is just as bad as mandating this kind of thing, well, you're totally wrong. And the emergency in our time is that they're mandating this kind of thing. And I agree with that, right? Like, I wouldn't say it's exactly equivalent, you know, in terms of like which matters more right now. But, you know, the principle is still the same and the principle matters. And for the same reason, ultimately, right? You know, I'm sure you saw Bob Murphy said, look, it's a slippery slope argument. It's the same as anything. You could have the government mandate anything that you're for, but then that means you're conceding the point that the other guys can use the same thing against you for something else. So
I think Buck Johnson's in the chat and he's saying, you know, we don't live in a property rights society. We live in a, you know, principle. We live in a civil rights society. And, you know, I was talking with Kinsella about this because obviously he's a lawyer. And I've been talking with Stacy about this because she's a lawyer. And, you know, they're basically making the argument. I made the argument to Kinsella that when you're looking at, like, the unvaccinated could basically become a suspect class at this point, just like minorities and everything like that. And this could turn into a civil rights issue. So,
well, certainly if it's a government, I mean, look at what's going on in New York. This government mandate. Now that's a passport. That's not, you know, a business one at a time, business owners or managers making decisions about how they want to do business. This is the government saying that you can't work there anywhere and that you can't be a customer anywhere. Unless you can't go in for a cup of coffee without showing your ID and your passport to go to do anything in New York City right now. And which immediately, just as I predicted, and this is why I was, I guess, too optimistic about the vaccine passport thing, if you go back 4 or 5 months ago, is I said, well, this is immediately going to be discriminatory against the poor and the Black and other minorities. You know, these kind of limousine liberal types like to project, you know, their fantasies on other people about how they think everything is. They like to pretend anybody who's reluctant to get a vaccine is some right-wing redneck Republican, but that's not true. Black people in America have a history of severe distrust of government medicine, and for obvious reasons, So that's been and also, you know what? They also, disproportionately work jobs where they have to deal with the general public. So that means they'd probably, I don't know exactly the statistics in New York, but if there's every reason for me to believe at least that they have disproportionately already been exposed to COVID. And so don't need a vaccine because they've been infected and have natural immunity in probably greater numbers than the rest of New York anyway. But here they're being completely excluded. And I'm amazed that it lasted already. Like there was one or two Black Lives Matter protests against the lockdown, against the passport thing. And then that sort of went away, I guess, so far. But I don't think that can last. And I don't think they're going to try that outside of New York and maybe San Francisco and a couple other of the absolute craziest places. But they ain't even going to try that in Austin, Texas. And in Austin, the leadership here wishes that they could be as horrible as in New York or San Francisco. But they're in Texas, and there's just no way to enforce that kind of thing around here. It just wouldn't be enforced. In fact, even at the very beginning of the lockdowns, Austin was rocking and rolling. People were out everywhere doing whatever they wanted all over the place and disregarded that, almost entirely from the very get-go.